one thing is we know change happens all the time. So get your organization changeable or change able. I talk about it all the time. So to your situation where you're getting this perfect thing going and getting these processes going, you know there's going to be defects. You know there's going to be problems. You don't know what they are, but you need to start talking to your people about when they happen, here's what we're going to do. And let them know. When there's a point where it's urgent, that it absolutely positively has to be fixed overnight,
yes,
right? This is how I'm going to do that.
I'm Dana White, founder and host of One Real Story, the podcast and book series where we provide entrepreneurs with practical advice through the voices of successful entrepreneurs. If you're a veteran, aspiring, or even an established entrepreneur, this show is for you. As always, I'm coming to you live from the Voice Hub production studio in Indy Atlantic, Florida. Our special guest today is an Army infantry veteran that is a successful entrepreneur that has owned a franchise with 5 territories, and then he sold it. In addition, for the past 15 years, he has provided facilitation services to support businesses' process improvement, strategic and operations planning, including change management for profit companies, government agencies, and nonprofits to help them accelerate results. He's truly the real deal. He has received numerous awards for his veteran advocacy work and is currently the FAVOB, Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, Space Coast Chapter Chair. My networking buddy and friend, Stuart Smith, but I call him Stu.
Thanks, Dana.
How you doing, Stu?
Good, brother.
All right.
And thanks for having me at the hub.
Hey, no problem. Glad to have you. So, this is one real story. We make mistakes and we keep going with it. This is the real deal, one take, right?
Good deal.
So I'm glad to have you here today. And, I just really want to know, what inspired you to purchase a franchise versus starting your own?
That's a great question. So I'm going to take it on 2 levels. I'm going to talk about my experience and I'm going to talk about franchising in general because I think your audience wants to hear about that.
Okay.
So my experience was this. When I left the service, I think about this, probably left the service before many of them joined. In 1992, I helped a lot of my fellow veterans get jobs in a traditional way. Networking, resume preparation, all the stuff human resource professionals do, right?
Right.
Many of those guys, and most of them were guys I was working with, they wanted to start their own business. I didn't know much about starting my own business. I'd always worked for somebody.
Right.
So I started working with the Southeast Association of franchisors, and got really interested in this franchise model. Well, meanwhile, I was helping another buddy who had a business who wanted to grow it into a franchise. So serendipitously, right, things just came together, and that's how this all started. So I helped my partner up in Atlanta get his organization into a franchise business model with the goal being to put my fellow veterans into the franchise. So that's how that side of it started.
Okay.
Now, the deal behind the deal, right, is I bought the 5 franchises basically for the price of 1 to support my efforts becoming the national franchisee director.
That was a heck of a deal.
I know. It was a very good deal. So I ran that successfully for 6 years, built it. We had a couple years of 120% growth year over year.
Yeah.
And got very involved back here in the community because this is where I went into the military from. And then I had a deserving fellow veteran who wanted to buy the franchise. And you can do that. You can sell a franchise from one franchisee to another franchisee depending on the franchise model. And so he was working for me. And then now he's the owner and operator of the franchise. So it's a fun deal.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing. I mean, you would think most franchises, like say a Chick-fil-A or McDonald's that you purchase, that you can't really sell it. Like it goes back to the franchisee, Yeah,
franchisor, right?
Franchisor.
Yep. So you got the franchisor and the franchisee. So it just depends. And there are so many different franchise models. So if veterans are thinking about franchises in particular, it's a cool way to start a business because the business model's done. So you don't have to actually work on the business, you work in the business. So the marketing program, the brand, the product, the services, suppliers, everything's built for you to go into it. Now, there's whole and some people would think, well, a Chick-fil-A franchise is just like a McDonald's franchise. It's not. They're completely different. Chick-fil-A is actually one of the least expensive franchises to get into.
Really?
Yeah, and people would go, well, wait a second, what's that all about? It's the way that Chick-fil-A identifies and grooms their potential franchisees. And so it's an easy entry into it, but then Chick-fil-A gets it on the back end, where McDonald's is a high upfront cost and they take less on the back end. So if you're thinking about franchising, go to, International Franchise Association. I worked with the Southeast Association of Franchisors and get to know what franchising is all about, because it is a great way to start a business. And you'd be amazed how many different franchises there are in different industries. A lot of people think about restaurants right up front, but you can get a franchise in tools, supplies.
Yeah.
The franchises are everywhere.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So you're saying that Chick-fil-A, they basically train you before you're ready for the purchase. And McDonald's is like, hey, if you're interested, we'll sell you a franchise and we'll train you along the way.
Yeah, kind of. What I'm saying is there are different kinds of franchises.
Yes,
and a lot of times when people use the word franchise, they just think of what they have in mind, right? What their experience is. So Chick-fil-A's franchisee selection is just different than McDonald's franchisee selection. So you just got to learn about the franchise you want to go into, and it's all in your disclosure document and then all your franchise agreement, because it is a highly contractual relationship. That's the other thing you need to know. When you go into business with somebody in a franchise, you are in business with that person in the franchise, and there are a lot of rights that they retain to make sure that you're doing business the way they want their business done, their branding. Hotels are often franchised. Auto dealerships are franchised. Right? So there's lots of franchises out there for veterans to consider.
Makes sense. So you were in the military prior, right? Yep. And thank you for your service. And infantry is not something that you kind of overlook.
Yeah, cool.
So how was your career in the military, and how has it helped you towards entrepreneurship?
Yeah, great question. And people ask me that all the time, like, do veterans make good entrepreneurs? Yes, they do. That's just the bottom line. So I spent 6 years, 8 months, 8 days on active duty. I joke about that because it comes under your DD-214. A great 7 years, but here's the deal. Even though I made rank really, really fast, and I was recognized in the Army. In fact, I was I got to think about this, a long time ago. So the 9th Infantry Division, I Corps and Force Com Soldier of the Year. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So got recognized, made rank, so on and so forth, had great assignments, actually spent all 7 years at Fort Lewis, Washington, believe it or not.
Cool place.
But, yeah, very cool place. But I feel like I make a better veteran than I did a soldier. And so when I left the service and I went to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington State, and that kind of ignited my passion for helping my fellow veterans. And then I had a career in human resources that lasted a good deal of time, which is kind of how I fell into this facilitation work. And it's just, again, that serendipitous kind of one connection leads to another connection. Because let me just share with you. So people will say, well, how did you start facilitating? Believe it or not, I was in the Army.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was called small group facilitation. And so the first and second level of NCOIC, so non-commissioned officer education system, they were facilitated by small group facilitators. So staff sergeants and sergeants like me would train E4s, and then staff sergeants, sergeant first classes would train E5s and E6s. So that's how it worked. You'd have an experienced non-commissioned officer facilitating small group leadership in the NCO academies. And that's how I started.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. But so you would say that that's helped you throughout your entrepreneur career based upon the hard work and facilitation and just everything that you acquired during there for entrepreneurship?
Yep. And I relate it this way. Air Force is probably the same way, Navy's the same way, all branches are the same way. To this day, Dana, now think about this. I left the service in 1992. So to this day, I still remember the traits we were looking for in a soldier: assertiveness, bearing, candor, commitment, confidence, decisiveness, empathy, flexibility, humility, initiative, right? So it gets ingrained in you what you're looking for in another person. And when you're in the military, you know the deal. You bond with people. And so I think one of the reasons that we make such good entrepreneurs is we have that values or trait foundation. And, the P was for persistence. You can't be in the military unless you're going to be persistent and you're going to see the mission through, and you're going to make sure that both, back in the day, it was the men and the mission.
Yeah.
And so you've got to balance those two things, and entrepreneurship is like that. So how do you take care of your people while accomplishing the mission of the business, which is to make money, bottom line?
Yeah.
So I think those traits and those values and those experiences make veterans ideal entrepreneurs. I'm sitting across from one right now.
Yeah.
So
Vetrepreneur.
That's right.
So would you say a person has a better chance at being successful at entrepreneurship with a background of the military?
That's kind of an intriguing question. I would say yes, just based on my experience. But here's the deal, and we know, right? There were folks that weren't such good folks in the military.
Absolutely.
Right? We had a word for them in the Army, right?
We got a word for them in the Air Force.
That's right. So I think the Army does, or the military in particular, does a great job of kind of grooming people who want to win, right? Grooming people who want to be part of a team, grooming people who have the discipline to do that. The Army or the military does not instill self-discipline. It allows a person with self-discipline to excel. And that's the difference. I think that because of your experiences in the military, you leave with those things that are really important to running a business. Self-discipline, perseverance, not willing to give up, connecting with each other.
Yeah.
In Central Florida, for the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, we've got 300 plus veteran-owned businesses here in Florida that are part of this organization, but we still have 86,000 businesses in the state of Florida that are veteran-owned. So we look for each other.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah,
and you can kind of tell when you walk into a room.
It's a brotherhood.
It's like
sisterhood.
Yeah. So I think it does really, really help to have that experience from the military to become an entrepreneur.
So what would be your biggest challenge in your entrepreneurship journey? And then, how did you overcome it?
Yeah. I often say that I was an accidental business owner. Okay. And so what had happened really was this whole idea of franchising was appealing to me, and my partner needed help. And so I was helping veterans. So it really wasn't that I started out to own and operate a franchise. It's just the opportunity presented itself, and it was intriguing. Now, I was still running two businesses at the time.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I'm still running my consulting work and building this franchise model for this organization. So I think the biggest thing and the advice I give people, whether they're career searching or thinking about starting their own business, is know yourself.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't seem like it's that profound, but it is that profound. You really have to know who you are, and you have to love what it is that you're doing. True. Because if you don't know that you have what it takes, and please hear me, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. If you're better working for somebody else, go work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? Don't start it. So know yourself. What are your strengths? What are your abilities? What are your interests? Are you passionate about what? Because it becomes, if you're married, people get this, your business becomes your wife and your wife becomes your girlfriend. I'm telling you, because you're married to that work. And then sometimes if you're running a business and your partner, your husband or wife are involved in it, it's even more amplified. And I'll tell you that, I've seen a lot of successful veteran-owned businesses run by two partners. And so, that's you have to have a support system. To be an entrepreneur, you have to have somebody who believes in you.
Yeah.
And usually that's the person closest to you. So
I've heard that a few times. That couples who you do have that support system are more successful than those who are going at it by themselves. So would you say that, how do you weather the storm when it becomes like you're the only one in the storm?
Right.
And there's no way out.
Yeah, it can be a lonely place, and it can be frustrating. There were times where I was ready to give up, but like I said, just military background, perseverance, self-discipline. You don't give up, and you got to remember something about when you're in that place. That point right there is the worst that it's going to be. You just got to imagine, right? That's the worst it's going to be, because you're going to learn something from it. You're going to gain some insight. You're going to gain some experience. You're going to be able to apply those lessons to, okay, so how did I get through it last week?
Yes.
And you know the deal.
Yeah.
There are times when you look at your checkbook and you're like, I'm not going to make something.
Yeah.
Right? Something's going to have to give here, or I'm going to have to find.
The more money you take, somebody's already has their hand out.
That's another thing. And being a small business, you're like employing people.
Yes.
You're employing an accountant. You're employing a social media person. You're employing others, even though they're not in your employment.
Yeah.
Because you're paying them a check every week. Yeah. And that's the other thing you've got to be able to do too, is you've got to be able to support yourself when you first start, because financially it's going to be difficult. I'd always encourage people to have at least 6 months, if not a year, of their expenses set aside or have access to it. Yeah. You know, a line of credit. I can't tell you the number of people I know that have taken out a second mortgage to start their business, and that's serious stuff.
Yeah.
You're putting everything on the line.
Yeah, you better stick with it.
Yeah, you bet, and you better be ready to stick with it. And to your point, get through all those tough periods. Yeah.
Absolutely. So your new company, or your existing company that you've already had while you had the franchises, was Facilitation Works.
That's right.
Right? Works with an E.
Works with an E, right?
But why did you go in a different direction or decide to go back into making this business prosper?
Got it.
After you sold the franchise.
Yeah. So the whole idea about the franchise was to become this national director of franchising. And unfortunately, I tell people all the time, there's a couple things that when you're in a relationship with a business perspective that you got to be super aware of. One of them is if you're working harder than your partner, your other partner, you really have to question, are you in it for the same reasons?
Yeah.
And so there's some tension in there when the effort is different and the results are different.
Always.
And if the person that you're working with doesn't have quite the business acumen you have or the experience that you have, and there's a disparity there, one of you may want to be moving faster than the other, going into a different market or whatever. So if you partner with somebody, you guys have got to be a partnership, right? So you've got to understand it. So I built this with the idea of becoming the national director of franchising. That didn't work out. And when the opportunity came that my partner, a fellow veteran, wanted to buy it, then it was just a perfect match. So I had been running Facilitation Works since 2008 because I experienced, hey, this is how a lot of people become entrepreneurs. They get fired. No, I got...
No, you're right.
I got laid off.
Laid off or fired.
2008, I got laid off.
Same here.
And so I had to find something to do. So I took the knowledge I have, the skill that I have, and got out of the role I was in and spent a year doing a change management effort around a big technology implementation. Mm-hmm. And so that ability to facilitate, that is to make things easier, that's the definition of facilitation, is the ability to bring a lot of skill sets to bear. Organizational development, change management, process improvement, all the things that I had built up over that career that I knew how to do. And then you bring them to bear and then make it easier for people to get organized, to execute, to understand each other, to work together in meetings, because that's where 90% of the work happens, right? Is in these planning and execution meetings. And then it just kind of built from there. But learning facilitation way back in the Army, right? And the ability to ask questions, because I'm telling you right now, Dana, one of the most powerful forces in the world is a question.
Yeah, most people are afraid to ask a question.
Yeah.
You know, I'll ask it. But, in the military, they only give you like 3 to 5 minutes to learn something new. Then I don't want to hear no questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Figure it out.
We ain't got time for questions.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but anything you can, this is advice I give to people, anything you can say, any statement you can make, if you want power in the situation, if you want to be a facilitator, just turn it into a question. Put a who, a what, a how, a why, a when in front of the statement you're going to make and let the other person respond to you. Because another thing about facilitation is there's always two sides of the story. There's always two sides of the story.
Always.
Even though when you're just looking at it, it looks like, well, this is, whatever this person's telling me, it's got to be the gospel about this situation. To be able to ask them questions and then ask other questions gives you a complete picture of it. And then you can really help people get unstuck.
So when it comes to facilitation, right, change management was one of them. And you can have all the processes in the world when it comes to your business. But getting people to accept the process and trust the process is another thing. Yep. And then getting them to accept change. because as soon as you develop a routine, and this is where I would ask you, what is the best practice for implementing change in a small business, rather it be technology,
Yep,
or just something in regards to just how they're transactional from their customer to inside their business.
got it.
So,
Yeah, there's a couple of truisms about change. One is that people really don't resist it because change happens all the time, right? Change in your pattern of driving to work because there's a construction zone. Change happens all the time. It's not that people really resist change; they resist being changed. So when change comes down from above and says, "Hear ye, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be different, and you're going to love it," it doesn't feel real good. But when you work with a good change manager, that's the person that comes in and says, okay, so business owner, what are you trying to accomplish? And they might say something. I'll give you an example. They say, listen, we want to implement this software program. Okay, so why do you want to do that? What's the benefit of doing that? And they'll explain their story. So most of the time they'll take that and they'll say, well, why don't you put a communication plan around there and convince people that this is a good thing? That's not how it works. I mean, it's how people want it to work. It's not how it works. So you go out and you engage the staff first and you ask them questions. So what are the problems that you're having in the work processes right now? Where are your delays? Where do you have to do rework? Where do you have to inspect things before they go? And if they build that story, they say, listen, these are all the problems that I have in there. And then you can ask a question, well, listen, if there's a solution to those things, would you be interested in it?
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, I would be interested in figuring that out. So it's just taking the change that has to happen and engaging people early on to get them to understand it and then be involved in it. And then they're more accepting of it versus hear ye, we're putting in this new software and you guys all behave.
Running like a dictatorship.
Yeah.
Get input.
Yeah. And so going out and helping people solve their own problems and then coming up with a solution and getting them involved and putting the solution in, that's how you have change happens.
So then now what about the quick change when you have to implement quick change? Because either you're losing money, you're bleeding out in your business and something needs to be done like now.
Yeah.
I mean, that same similar process takes in effect as in, say, you're explaining to the team why it has to go into place.
Right.
And then say when it will take place and then go ahead and implement it so they can at least feel like it's coming.
Right.
Because I can say that, personally speaking, me in entrepreneurship, in the businesses that I've had before, you're either, I'm a perfectionist, come from an engineering background.
Yep.
So you design this entire system, but as you watch it work, you're like, oh, there's a bad spot. I need to change it. And what other people, because you have employees, so people are involved. So that change impacts, even though that was a quick change that probably needed to happen, it still impacts them.
Absolutely.
But I think that's where I've kind of made the mistake at times, but I've learned to where, just like I'm mentioning now, you may have times where you have to quick change. So am I wrong or?
I think you're spot on. And in fact, I think you're real close to answering your own question.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right?
But did you have anything you wanted to add to it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
So one thing is we know change happens all the time. So get your organization changeable or change able. I talk about it all the time. So to your situation where you're getting this perfect thing going and getting these processes going, there's going to be defects. There's going to be problems. You don't know what they are, but you need to start talking to your people about when they happen, here's what we're going to do. And let them know. When there's a point where it's urgent, that it absolutely positively has to be fixed overnight, right? This is how I'm going to do that. And then they know ahead of the change. And they can ask you questions when the pressure's off. Well, Dana, let me ask you this. If that happens like that, wouldn't it be better to do this? And then you might get information from them about how they want to do quick change.
Yes.
That's going to enable you to do quick change when you need to do it. And rarely does it does happen, but if we start thinking about change in organizations that happens on a regular cycle, we don't have to talk about the exact change. We just have to talk about how we're going to manage it when we get there, because we know we're going to get there.
Nice.
Does that help?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I definitely love it because, you're a subject matter expert in what you do, and having you here to be able to explain that. Sometimes it's just that thing that someone else needed to hear.
Right.
You know? So how important is facilitation in business and ensuring continuous process improvement?
Yeah, I apply a lot of my facilitation skills to process improvement. And I'm one of the, probably one of the few, there are a few of us out there, but I actually studied all of Dr. Deming's original work. So I had a dear friend of mine, Chris Glenn, who introduced me to Dr. Deming. We used to go in on Saturdays at work and sit there and watch Dr. Deming on these videos explain his system of profound knowledge.
Yeah.
And so everything that has come out of Joe Duran and Peter Schultes and Dr. Deming's work and Bill Hunter, all the icons of Ishikawa, all the icons of quality movement, I've studied way beyond, my Georgia Tech black belt certification. Okay. Yeah. So there's nothing new. There's just nothing new. And what those folks were talking about applies today, just as it applied yesterday. And so process improvement is really about continuously looking at the operations. And especially when things are going well, that's when you should be looking for problems.
Yeah, of course, right?
There's the irony of it, yes. Because if you wait until a problem happens, it's just like your change piece. We got to fix this right now. And maybe you're just putting a Band-Aid on a symptom and not getting to a root cause. And so when you think about process improvement and facilitating process improvement, whether it's events, based on different modules, agile, waterfall, whatever system you want to use, continuous process improvement, facilitation just enables it more because it's more inclusive of people. Okay. It's getting more people's perspectives. It's getting people to always think about how could we do this better? How can we make this cheaper, faster, better? And then on change management side is if we do it, just because we can do it, should we do it, right? If we do it, what's the impact of the rest of the organization?
Awesome.
Yep.
So, at what point would someone seek your services? Within 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years? Because obviously this is a part of the foundation of a business.
Right.
Now, your consulting expertise, at what point should they come in?
Yeah, so some of the services that I offer vary. So I work with a lot of organizations that do strategic planning. And so if they say, hey, I really believe there's value in us working together as a leadership team to think about the future and how we might approach that with our business, that can be a long cycle. And I've worked with companies over a number of years with strategic planning and the execution of that and change management that goes along with that. And then there are people that call me and say, hey, Stu, we got 10 people coming in next week, or we got 10 people who are going to be on this Zoom call next week, and we want to do some productive brainstorming around cost savings.
Yes.
And so they might call me this week and ask me to be ready to go next week. So it just depends on the kind of services that I'm providing. Right. What's really satisfying, and this is a cool story because it just recently happened today. So I worked with an executive who had a print and digital media big company in the Atlanta area. And I did their strategic plan with them through, I think, 2 cycles. So I think 3 to 6 years I was working with them. Did a big change management project with them. That executive actually left that business, and now he's out on his own. And he emailed me the other day. He said, Stu, I got some strategic planning stuff I got to do. I need your help right away. So it's so satisfying when somebody,
he gets it.
Yeah, and he liked the relationship that we had and the work that we did together. And so a lot of my clients come back to me. I don't advertise much.
Yeah.
But pretty loyal.
That's good. That's a lot to be said in your character and how you, treat your clients.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, can nonprofits benefit from your services?
Absolutely. I have a huge list of nonprofits that I work with. And so whether you run a nonprofit, the argument about, hey, should we run a nonprofit like a business? Should we run it, just like a pure nonprofit? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's a relevant conversation because they're both operations, right? They both have all the stuff that you need. They've got an HR function, an IT function, operation function, leadership function, so on and so forth. But not-for-profits also have some dynamics that are important to think about. First of all, they're probably serving a unique clientele or trying to solve something, right, that's really special. So I like working for not-for-profits because they do that kind of work, addressing homelessness, addressing advocacy work, so on and so forth. It's still doing the same thing. It's still planning It's still executing. It's still managing change. And it's still this underpinning of facilitation helping them with that. So whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, it works both ways. In fact, FAVOB, right, is pretty much a nonprofit. And so I'm working with volunteers. And oh, by the way, even if they're paid volunteers, that's what I call employees. Right? They're still volunteers. They still can decide not to show up tomorrow. So treat everybody as if they were a volunteer, and they could leave whenever they need to leave, and treat them with respect and dignity, and you'll keep them a lot longer. But again, for-profits, not-for-profits, work with both.
Awesome. Relationship building is important.
That's right.
So now you've brought up FAVOB. So FAVOB is the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, which you are the chair.
That's correct.
So, like, how important is community service? Because that takes up a lot of your time.
Yes, it does.
And all right, explain, please. How important is it?
And then, and you hear me say this all the time. So, this is the year of my 60th birthday, right? My 60th trip around the sun. Okay,
a day over 49.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I think as you get older, you find more time, or you create more time to give back to the community, just because you're not so focused on your career or building your career. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do it through my entire life. So recognized by Rotary International, recognized by the Atlanta Society for Human Resource Management for my advocacy work. Having been the past chair of the Military Affairs Council, the Cocoa Beach Chamber, and now the incoming chair for the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses. And you find your way through there, and you find the things that you're passionate about, and it really does make a whole life, or a complete life. I'll tell you a fun story, because I want to give credit to somebody we just lost this year. So I was up in Titusville, Florida, and I see this larger-than-life guy with this cowboy hat on, black cowboy hat, cowboy boots, jeans, and a long-sleeve shirt, and flipping August, right, in Titusville, Florida, where it's hot. And I see him buy a bunch of gift cards, and I just had to ask him, because he was walking out, and I forget what he had on his hat or whatever, but I immediately identified him as a veteran, right? And so I just stopped him. I said, "Hey, what are you doing? What's going on?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Hey, my name is George Taylor, and I run the National Veterans Homeless Support Organization, which is a nationally known, best-in-class homeless veteran support organization, now run by his son, because we lost George this year, unfortunately." And George said, "Are you interested in getting involved?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So for about 4 years of my life, I spent every Monday morning at the House of Hope, which is a food bank, and we would identify veterans that were coming through that line and help them get the veteran services that you need. And what George taught me that was so powerful and so important is you got to go where the problem is. You can't just set your nonprofit office up on XYZ Street and expect your clients to get to you. You got to go to where your clients are at. And so we would do search and rescue, where we'd go into the woods and find where the homeless camps are and help homeless veterans, because it's a big problem. And that, it's usually caused by something, whether it's a dependency, physical or mental illness, whatever the case may be, or they're just economically displaced and they don't want to be homeless.
Right.
And we got them out of the woods. So so whether it's FAVOB, employment, homelessness, it makes for a satisfying life. And I would encourage people. I don't know, they call it corporate responsibility or whatever. I don't care
corporate social responsibility.
Exactly.
CSR?
I don't care what word you use for it. Find something that you're passionate about and get involved in it.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I mean, I think that is pretty big, where you've made it a passion to help homeless veterans.
Yeah.
Most people don't. They think we have it all made, but some veterans kind of like go awry because, Vietnam War, for example.
Absolutely.
That, produced a lot of veterans that weren't welcomed as much when they came back as we are welcome today.
Yep.
So that is very important to pay it forward. So what are your plans now for the future or projects that you're working on?
Yeah. Client work is, takes up my time. FAVOB takes up a lot of my time. Rebranding Facilitation Works with your help. So thank you very much for that.
J.Media.
Exactly. J.Media helping me out with rebranding of Facilitation Works. And it's works with an E because that word by definition, W-E-R-K, means doing your best regardless of circumstance. Okay?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I feel like, how I approach business problems is we can find a solution and we're going to work on it until we do find a solution. So the client work, FAVOB is really, you know it because you're working with me at FAVOB, and you know sometimes I can be, how do I say it, impatient and sometimes impossible because I just want stuff done. And so just building that organization and helping my fellow veterans help other veterans get into business is really important to me. So those are the big things that are going on, and enjoying life, you know, living at the beach.
That's nice. Hey, we're in Florida.
That's right.
So, you know, living at the beach, but you're here still working hard despite the community service for facilitation works. Can you let everyone know where to find you and how to reach out to you?
Yeah, the easiest way to reach out to me is just go to my LinkedIn profile. So LinkedIn profile, my company page, Facilitation Works, is on LinkedIn because right now you and I are working on rebranding and launching the website. So all that stuff is coming. But I use LinkedIn quite a bit. I was an early adopter of LinkedIn because I was in the HR field when it first started. And so they can just do that. And so get a hold of me there. I tell people the worst thing that can happen, all my contact information is there, by the way. So the worst thing that can happen is you have to wait on me to respond. I will respond. You know me. I follow up on everything. Tasks do not go undone. So yeah, get with me on LinkedIn and we'll start a conversation.
Sweet. Well, Stu, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely,
I really appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners really appreciate it as well. And then now to our listeners, thank you for your time, and let us know what you think of our show. And stay tuned. There's more to come with our book series and episodes. If you have any questions or would like to continue to be inspired, you can always find us at onerealstory.com. And in closing, remember, the more money you make, the more Uncle Sam takes.
That's right.
So make sure you're smart about it. Make sure you're doing your accounting, and make sure you have a bookkeeper and taking care of your revenue when you're getting started in entrepreneurship or as you continue. Do things right the first time around, and you don't have to worry about any repercussions later on down the line.
That's right. Yep.
Thank you very much. I'm Dana White. Talk to you later. Bye.